So welcome. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time to come along today. Can everyone hear me properly? Great, brilliant. So if I haven't met you before, my name is Amy, and I'd like to welcome you to this Church Urban Fund webinar this morning. It is called Starting and Running a Place of Welcome. So hopefully you're finding yourselves in the right place. So before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping for us. So today's session is being recorded, but don't worry, your faces won't be visible on the recording. We'll send that recording to you afterwards, and we'll also pop it up on our website so you can direct other people there afterwards, people who can't make it, or maybe other people in your church who might find it interesting. And you should also be able to see a chat button, possibly at the bottom of your screen, where you can post questions as we go along. If anything comes to mind that you think you want to know about places of welcome, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Just click on that chat button and pop it in, and we will pick it up later. So thank you very much for coming. We hope that this will be useful in some way to you and your church. So this webinar is the first of a series of 5 webinars, all designed for churches to help equip and inspire you as you engage with your communities and just do the amazing work that you're doing. So each of the webinars links to one of the Growing Good themes. So that is Church Urban Fund's free 6-session course, which is helping churches to explore the connection between social action, discipleship, and growth. Today we are linking to the theme of hospitality, which is one of the 5 that's explored in the course. Brilliant. So this is what we're going to cover this morning. We're going to look a little bit about the history of places of welcome, how we've got to where we are now. We're going to have a look at our values, which we call the 5 Ps. We're going to have a think about how you would actually get started in setting up a place of welcome, what kind of things you should think about. Then we're going to have some tips on how to run a successful place of welcome. And then at the end, as I said, we'll have a bit of time for your questions. So first of all, a bit of a potted history to places of welcome. So places of welcome originally came out of conversations during Birmingham's Social Inclusion Inquiry, which began way back in 2012, and it explored issues of exclusion and poverty in Birmingham. So they thought about questions like, what happens to someone who's newly arrived in our city? Is Birmingham a welcoming city to come into? And the response was that Birmingham, like many places, can be welcoming, but if someone's new to the area, maybe they're not very well resourced, maybe they're not well connected, and perhaps English isn't their first language as well, then often it isn't the most welcoming, and actually it can be a really difficult place to navigate. Likewise, people who've lived there for a really long time could also feel isolated. Perhaps their circumstances have changed, perhaps they've recently been made bereaved or redundant, or maybe they've had a new baby, all of which can massively impact, of course, a person's life and the connections that they hold with others and their place in the community. So out of this came the idea of faith groups who were already offering welcome and support at regular times of the week to anyone who wanted it, forming a network of places of welcome. And what they did, they identified commonalities between the groups that were already running these activities, and those commonalities now make up the DNA, as it were, of places of welcome, those 5 Ps, which we'll look at in a bit. So largely because of the simplicity, the beautiful simplicity of places of welcome as a model, the network has grown, and more community and faith groups, a large percentage of which are churches, have decided to join the network and either set up a new place of welcome, or they're using their existing coffee morning or similar space that opens regularly to become a place of welcome. And it's now grown all across the country. Now, in a post-pandemic context, I suppose, and with the cost of living crisis, having these safe, warm, welcoming spaces where you can easily access your community, you can be listened to, you can be signposted to advice and support that you need, and you can form real reciprocal relationships are, of course, all the more important. Okay, so onto our values as places of welcome, the 5 Ps. So we summarise our values in these 5 Ps. And They are, first of all, a place. So an accessible space that is open to all for free, at least weekly, in the same place every week, so that people can depend on it and they know that it's going to be there, it's going to be open for them. Second one is people. So it's open to everyone, regardless of their circumstances or their situation, and it's staffed by volunteers. Third one is presence. So it's a place where people feel genuinely respected and listened to. People actively listen to each other at places of welcome. Next one is provision. So it's a hospitable place with hot drinks, good conversation, and where you can get local information that you need. So whether that's, finding out where the best play groups are, which is a good leisure centre for swimming on a Tuesday, what food bank is open on a Wednesday, how do the buses work in the area? Can you buy a ticket? But how does it work? So places of welcome offer at least a cup of tea and a biscuit at no cost. And we know that's really important that it's at no cost, because we don't want to exclude anyone who can't pay. And also basic local information. And then finally, and really key, is participation. So places of welcome are spaces for people to participate in their communities. It's not just about being done to and being helped, but being encouraged to help out or share your abilities in some way. So we've had places of welcome before where everyone shares different interests each week and everyone gets to have a go. So like drumming, patchwork quilt making, learning about train spotting, all kinds of things that places of welcome have got involved in because people have brought along their own interests and passions. Or maybe someone might be an incredible baker and they make the bread and the cakes for places of welcome each week, and that's something that they bring and they contribute. This concept of participation is so core to places of welcome that people come ready to give, and if they're not ready to give, that they'll be empowered to be able to give. It's about discovering what people's gifts and talents and passions are and how they can give of them to their place of welcome, and then in turn also their wider community. So this is a quote that I just wanted to share from you because it's wonderful, from an NHS social prescriber in the Midlands. So it says, "I've worked with a very isolated gentleman for many years and I've introduced him to many social inclusion activities, but he's never felt comfortable anywhere. However, after going to a place of welcome, initially with me, for the first time, he feels comfortable enough to go there on his own. He has a taxi there and back, but he manages to cope with the anxiety of the taxi ride as he feels truly accepted by the people there." Okay, now we're actually going to get practical. Thankfully, you're not going to have to listen to my voice anymore. So we're going to look at how would you actually go about setting up a place of welcome and what should you think about this. And for this, I'm going to hand over to my lovely colleague, Nadine. And at this point, can I just remind you that we do have the chat. If you have any questions, pop them in there and we'll pick them up at the end.
Hello, everybody. Good to meet you. Here at Church Urban Fund, I'm the person taking strategic lead for places of welcome. And so I hope that what I'm able to share with you answers the critical questions about registering, other things we need to think about. But before we do that, I want to pause for a minute and simply ask the question, are we willing to be transformed by the neighbourhood we want to see change? It's an important first question to ask ourselves about the hospitality that we want to offer, especially in as much as we're offering something of ourselves to people around us, we're also suggesting an openness to receiving the gifts, the passions, the commitments, the little bit else that someone else has to give to us. Amy used that very important word earlier, reciprocal. And a place of welcome is always a mutual enterprise. So are we willing to be changed by all the people that we deliberately take the time to know better in a place of welcome, especially as they offer something of themselves to us? And they're going to do that regularly. And their lives and our relationships are going to evolve. Working with our neighbours. What have our neighbours told us about what they need? We ask ourselves this question because a place of welcome isn't simply there to do something good or even for, or even worse, to do something good to other people. Places of welcome are places in which we do things with one another. So before starting from scratch, before trying to define what a place of welcome will do and when it will do it and how it will do it, again, we ask that question, what have our neighbours told us about what they need? Have they asked for another venue in the community which offers a welcome? Or is there something else they might like to try with us, like a litter pick with anyone who might want to help, that ends in a cup of tea or coffee and a biscuit and just a really good chat after an hour's work together. So a place of welcome doesn't necessarily mean that we're meeting in a church space just to talk. There's lots of other things that places of welcome try together. What about meeting in a local park? We heard last week from a colleague about a pop-up place of welcome that is held at the school gate once a week at a local school on the Lodge Hill estate in Birmingham. That's how creative a place of welcome might be. Perhaps something that's a little easier to think about is what we can add to what our neighbourhood has to offer. What is it that we bring to the resources in our community? Sometimes it is the space in our building. We know that in a lot of communities, churches are the only communal spaces still left to a neighbourhood. Perhaps what we have to offer is our sincere desire just to be helpful. Sometimes it's the connections within our community. Churches are collectively holding all sorts of interesting information, all sorts of good practice about how to get on with life in the neighbourhood. I ask this question, I asked the one before, because they lie at the core of what is called asset-based community development. That means we're developing a community using the whole community's strengths and potential. We use a community's own resources, its own skills and its own experience to grow good from within a neighbourhood. We are doing things with our neighbours and not to or for people without inviting them to contribute. Now, when you register a place of welcome, we do ask a few questions. We ask for a few commitments. So this next slide is based on exactly what you'll find in a form, an online form for registering a place of welcome. And we start with simplicity. Places of welcome don't require a formal constitution. They don't require a committee. There is simply a local neighbourhood solution to what people want to do together on a regular basis. And for that reason, we try to keep them as simple as possible, both in their organisation and in their delivery. You may have a rota of volunteers. You might have agreed beforehand who will bring the tea, the coffee, and the biscuits or cake, but it's no more complicated than that. Unless there's an additional activity, an arts or craft, or a walk that evolves from what you agree to do together. free tea, coffee and biscuits. And yes, we do really ask you on our registration form whether this is something that you're willing to offer. The tea, coffee and biscuits are always free. But if someone would like to make a donation, a place of welcome is also always free to receive the gift. No one is ever charged for the tea, the coffee and the biscuits, which are always on offer. But if it's within someone's desire or commitment or just thank you to offer something back, there's no reason not to accept their gift. And of course, a place of welcome can always offer something more. So there'll be places of welcome with cake. In some neighbourhoods, there's places of welcome which offer soup and a roll, or toasties, or breakfast. That depends on the resource that your church might be willing to add to that place of welcome and what people are eventually willing to provide for each other. A slightly more difficult thing to plan for, perhaps to think about, is the question of volunteers, because we know at the moment that there are loads of things that people could be doing. Volunteering is harder to encourage people to do at the moment. Places of welcome are always hosted by a group of volunteers. It doesn't mean that those volunteers aren't supported by paid staff, development workers, or potentially the caretaker of the building, but it's always hosted by a group of volunteers, even if you're only starting with one or two. Saying that, it's important to work out how often those very willing people are to give their time and their energy, because places of welcome are open as regularly as possible, usually once a week. So how much are those volunteers willing and able to do every week? Will there be enough volunteers to do what we're hoping to achieve together? What might we need to recruit more help? Have a good conversation about volunteers, because the hardest thing to do is to close the place of welcome, because the number of volunteers has declined for loads of entirely acceptable reasons. But there is some disappointment that follows when people have built good relationships and there isn't a sustainable way to support them. Space. Churches often have space which we don't mind sharing, but it is worth thinking about how we feel as we share that space, especially when we open it to people who might not be used to being in a church space, might not be used to being in what we would call our sacred space. Sometimes we step on one another's toes without quite meaning to. Recently, a very pressing question has emerged around the affordability of energy bills, and that does impact how some churches share their premises. Sometimes places of welcome haven't been able to continue because of that consideration, but very creatively, some places of welcome have responded by agreeing to change the time at which they meet regularly to coincide with those hours when the building has already been heated for another activity and is perhaps still warm. Some places of welcome reduce their hours so that less heating is required. There's always an innovative solution where people are willing to talk together. Something else that's worth considering is whether there is an additional quiet space, perhaps even a separate room where someone can have quieter or more confidential conversations, or simply be for a while if they're feeling overwhelmed or tired. We have it on good authority that many of our guests snooze a little at places of welcome. If we have space, how accessible is it to people of varying abilities? Where is the ramp that makes it possible for wheelchair users and carers with buggies to enter our space? Because sometimes it's not at the door that everyone else is using. How do we help people to find their way in? Do we have accessible toilet facilities? Might someone need a baby changing table? And it's not only physical need which determines the accessibility of a space. Can people always expect to find us where we say we will be? Because not everyone is on Facebook. Not everyone uses email. Perhaps not everyone can remember what we said last week about where we will be this week, because they're starting to struggle with memory loss. Maybe not everyone can read our English posters or notices. Saying that, signs and posters remain valuable, not just in advertising the times and the places at which we're open, but an arrow explaining where to go can make all the difference. A notice confirming that we're definitely open today can ease that anxiety that someone feels about entering a space, especially if it's the first time they've come, especially if they've been referred by someone who's aware that they're struggling from agoraphobia, that they haven't been out for a long time because of COVID. Another resource that we add to our communities, especially as churches, is knowledge of our neighbourhood. A place of welcome is always able to share information about the place in which it finds itself. There are people and notice boards and leaflets which amplify what is already happening. Perhaps there's even a volunteer who's happy to find out more and ensure that the community news is up to date. What do you already know about your community that you just take for granted? That's a gift to your neighbourhood when it's shared with those who'd like to know more. And the time that we take to very deliberately learn information about other things happening in our neighbourhoods is also the time we spend talking to people about what we're planning to do with what we're learning. That's the time we spend talking about what the place of welcome might become. That's when we can invite someone else to share in what we're doing. Places of welcome, once you've registered, provide free branded resources. So when you register your place of welcome, we place at your disposal the signage. We also put your place of welcome on our national map with a locator that marks where you are, how far you are, 10 miles, 5 miles, 2 miles from your local GP surgery, from the postcode that somebody enters. Those resources come with training materials too. So when you register a place of welcome, you're not on your own. You're part of a network, which we try very deliberately to resource. I want to talk a little bit about inspiring our volunteers. Volunteers are far more than people who fill a rota of jobs that need to be done. Volunteers are generally inspired by the why of what needs to be done. When you're inviting someone to help, look for stories about places of welcome. You can find them on the Places of Welcome website, or use the stories that you find in the Growing Good toolkit, which can inspire and inform people as to why one does this. If we're going to keep things simple, easily replicated routines, which are filled with doable tasks that encourage participation from other people, are really good at supporting volunteers of varying abilities. Leaving everything up to 1 or 2 people who do it all for everyone else is also eventually very tiring and ultimately unsustainable. It's always easier to ask someone to help with something small then it is to take a lot of responsibility that has to be transferred to someone else when someone finds they're giving up. If you can explain how to fill your dishwasher or your washing up bowl just after a place of welcome, if you can point someone for the first time to where they'll find the mugs and where they can return them, you're adding to the confidence of your volunteers too. So you've given them something small to do. But when you also feel, and when they feel that everyone is able to do what's required, then our volunteers start to experience a sense of welcome in a whole new way. So we share information, but we also model exactly how we do things, because in churches, there's always the drawer where only certain things go. There's always that routine for putting away cups and saucers, which only a few people know. Hand that information on before someone finds themselves on the wrong side of where the mugs ought to have been put. That kind of experience also begs the question, are we open to changes and good practice that might be brought to us by new participants and new volunteers? Sometimes they do have better ideas about what might need to be done. Sometimes an idea accepted, a different routine embraced, is what helps to make people feel more welcome. Creating safe space. Welcoming space is at its heart also a safe space in which we've tried to anticipate some of those things which could sometimes go wrong, which undermine that safe space we're trying to create. For churches, it's sometimes easier to create that safe space because we have already visited the issue of our safeguarding policy. And most churches also have, well, all churches should have public liability insurance in place. Something slightly harder to complete might be a risk assessment, those plans you make for when the unforeseen happens. Places of Welcome also has template documents for both the safeguarding policy and the risk assessment. If you feel you'd need help to work around the little things that don't go wrong. But we ask every place of welcome that registers with us to confirm that they're doing their best at creating a safe space for others. Training. I've spoken a little bit about the tea and cup incident. If we don't know what we're doing, as a volunteer, helping volunteers to feel welcome and comfortable in helping takes a little bit more time and a little bit more effort than simply asking someone to do what's already on the rota. We try to ensure that all places of welcome volunteers and learn not just once, but discuss over and over again what a place of welcome is. We really do mean that everyone is welcome, and places of welcome don't prevent anyone from dropping in. Someone might come in and work out for themselves that perhaps this isn't a place that's for them, but that's their decision. We don't stop anybody from joining in. We listen actively to one another. We take time to engage closely with what someone is saying to us, showing that we understand by asking relevant questions, using expressions and gestures to show that we understand what we've heard. And we help our volunteers through webinars delivered by Places of Welcome to explore where they might go to learn more about good conversations. No one is talked to or talked at or even talked with about becoming a Christian or joining our church. We do not encourage proselytizing. It doesn't mean that people don't develop good relationships, don't develop trusted friendships, which lead them to ask, is this a place that I'd like to come to more often? Or why do people share this hospitality with us as they do? But we don't say to people that you need to be a Christian to be in this space with us. Essentially, what we encourage people to think about is where the power lies when someone crosses our church threshold and receives hospitality from us, where people in a space feel that they have less power. Those who have power should be discouraged from using that power to get someone to think or to do as they do. What if this suddenly all feels too difficult? What if I heard some things about registering a place of welcome that perhaps I can't do yet? I would say to you, please don't let it stop you from doing what you can. Ask us for help if you need a sounding board to work out what's possible. If you find at the moment that you can't do it every week because you don't perhaps have all the volunteers you need to, it doesn't mean you can't start. You don't have to register as a place of welcome right away. You can still offer hospitality. You can try out some of the principles around something like participation. You can encourage volunteering from within the group. And you might eventually discover that you have all the volunteers you need to register your place of welcome to be open once a week. You might find that you never quite get to that point, or you can do some of what a place of welcome offers and not the rest. Why not get in touch with us to find out if there's another place of welcome already operating in your neighbourhood? There's nothing stopping you from deciding that you have gifts to share, which can be added to what another church might be doing in an ecumenical project. From my own experience, I was formerly a minister, and we had an extraordinary parish church locally who had too many people working in their, what they called their IT outreach. Our experience of the pandemic was utterly transformed because they set at our disposal a young person who was able to help us and our congregation to learn how to use Zoom. So you may not be able to run your own place of welcome, but what could you add to the place of welcome offered elsewhere in your community? Get in touch with us if you'd like to try to do that. Amy's just going to help me to jump back. There we go. Help from places of welcome is available from area coordinators. There are at least 20 dioceses locally who have area coordinators that can help you in face-to-face conversations at your venue to work through some of the questions around becoming a place of welcome. You're always welcome to visit our website. If you have specific questions, email us. Places of Welcome also has a newsletter in which we share information, resources, ideas, and good news stories that might inspire others. We also have resources available at the website, and many of those resources are made available through webinars too. I hope that is a useful introduction to some of the things you want to think about as you register a place of welcome. Back to Amy.
Hello again, please do excuse our chair swapping. We're going to have a little interlude now. Before we hear from Carrie, who has a vast amount of experience with places of welcome, who's going to share some tips with us. I'm going to introduce Adam, who is going to talk to us about growing good. Now, as I mentioned, this webinar is one of a series of 5, and they all link to the growing good themes. Now, Growing Good is a resource that Church Urban Fund makes available to churches for free, and it's a 6-session course helping churches to explore the connections between social action, discipleship, and growth. So I'd like to introduce Adam now, and he's just going to tell us a bit about that before we go over to Kerry.
Good morning, all. Thank you for joining us this morning. I hope you're having a good morning so far. As Amy said, Growing Good is a 6-series free course that we've been using now since 2021 and is growing in strength and numbers of people who are using it. It came on the back of 3-year research that was done between Church Urban Fund and the Theos think tank that was looking at the linkages between social action, social justice, and church growth. And as part of that 3-year research that happened sort of over the pandemic as well, there were 60 parishes that were sort of engaged with on that, and a real mixture of urban, rural and coastal contexts on that. And there were over 350 interviews done, trying to gain people's experiences of what linkages into a community meant for church growth. And we're not just looking here in terms of church growth numerically, although that can be one of the outcomes of this, but it's also about growth in confidence of a church to be able to connect with local communities and what local need is, but also growth in discipleship. My experience is very much that social action projects, social justice projects help me as a disciple of Jesus and grow in that, as well as hopefully making disciples of other people. And so that's a really key thing, that it helps people grow in their own confidence and discipleship in this. And there are 5 themes that Growing Good looks at that come out of the research, and those are presence, perseverance, hospitality, adaptability and participation, because the research shows that churches grow in number and in depth when they are present and they're connected to their local communities. That churches have been around for a long time, especially in the Church of England parish system, and that longevity and that perseverance in a local area makes churches well placed to provide this kind of support. Places of welcome are all about hospitality and generosity, and the research shows that hospitality, that offering of generous hospitality, is really significant as part of building up those connections with local community. And one of the themes that comes out is adaptability. And we all know how adaptable we've had to be over the last 3 years, as Nadine has said about sort of using other people's skills. How can we serve a community that's in a state of flux and change? So that's one of the things that comes out very much in Growing Good. And then finally, that thing of participation, that idea of actually getting involved, discerning what's happening in your local area. As Rowan Williams is often quoted as saying, it's all about, mission is about discerning what God is doing and then joining in with that. And seeing that participation can lead to greater connections, can lead to those conversations about faith that may make people take that first step on a faith journey. So the course follows on from that. I say 6 modules, very practical modules, really good. There's loads of advice on the website, which I'm sure we'll share the link with after this webinar. There's loads of really good stuff that's in there. It's really easy to run. You don't have to do a lot of preparation for it. And we're really starting to see the impact of churches that have used this, that have changed their thinking, that have sort of revolutionized the way they want to think about a church and their connections with their local community. So I really do sort of recommend that you have a look at it and see what you can do. And Places of Welcome is a great way to start off your Growing Good journey, and how you can really start to think about what's happening in your local community, who the people are, what their needs are, and how things can be, and how you can serve that community. I'm going to get Amy now to play a video, and then I'll hand back over to Amy.
We all want our churches to grow, to be places where people of all backgrounds can belong, contribute and encounter Jesus, no matter where they are on their faith journey. And we all want communities of joy, justice and right relationships, where the work of the Holy Spirit is evident. But how do we make that happen?
The Growing Good Toolkit is designed to help churches connect the dots between social action, discipleship, and growth. Through flexible, interactive small group sessions, we will explore how our churches can be faithful and fruitful in our local communities. The Growing Good Toolkit is based on 3 years of research by Theos and Church Urban Fund. We've learned from over 60 churches, big and small, urban and rural, in areas of affluence and in low-income communities, and in everything in between.
As we journey through the toolkit, we will hear from scripture, as well as research and stories from churches all across England. In our small groups, we'll learn from each other and consider what God might be calling us to do together. And we will pray, seeking God's wisdom and blessing.
God is at work transforming people and places. He's inviting us to be part of his story of transformation. Will you join us in Growing Good?
So I'd now like to welcome Carrie, who I believe is on the call for the moment. Yes, there you are, Carrie. You'll just have to unmute in a moment. Carrie, for some years now, has been facilitating the running of local places of welcome in the Black Country. Thank you so much for joining us, Carrie. You're here to share your vast wisdom that you have gained from your years of working with alongside places of welcome, and share some stories of what works well. Over to you, Carrie.
But perhaps if we could just go through a couple of little other things that may be helpful. I think there's something about having an open door. You're not sure who's going to come through the doors. So maybe just a little bit of preparation before your place of welcome. You may know people who are struggling that will come through your doors. So maybe think between your team. There's some people need to be taken to one side to have personal, private conversations who perhaps are struggling a little bit more. So if you're aware of those people that might be coming through your doors, give a little thought to how you can help them and manage them. You might have somebody perhaps who dominates the conversation, very, very chatty again, and you want to perhaps share that out in the group. So again, think about how you can perhaps talk to that one person on their own so other people get to share in the conversations and talk as well. So sometimes a little planning, if you know the people who are coming through the door, helps. And if you are a prayerful place of welcome, and not all of our places of welcome are, they're in libraries or bus shelters in different places. But if you are, obviously take the opportunity to pray with your team beforehand, and then also perhaps debrief at the end if there's anything that's been disclosed to you that you might be wanting to, get some advice on or share, or you feel you might need to signpost somebody who comes through your doors, then please take that opportunity to get support from your team. And rely on other people. And if you're not feeling the best on the day of your place of welcome, sometimes you're not always feeling the most bubbly person to welcome everybody else, then please take the support of your team, and you just perhaps take the welcome that's on offer that day and sit and have chats and be served that cup of tea, and have that biscuit, and let other people take the strain for a time. So yeah, please do look after yourselves and each other as part of your team. The other thing I would say is about promotion of your place of welcome. Do try that in as many different formats as you can, like posters, like I say, social media, what have you. But never forget that the most important way to get somebody to your place of welcome is just to invite, and ask that personal invitation. It's always the best way. I always think if somebody asks me to something, I kind of think, oh, that's nice. They're well-meaning, they've offered that invitation. But if they ask me 2 or 3 times, I actually think, they do want me to come. They actually mean it. So, if you ask somebody once and they don't come, please don't be put off. Do ask them again another time. And repeat that invitation. The other thing I'd say is about partnership as well. I think we mentioned today that if your place of your church may be not the most warm building or hospitable building, and there is another one nearby, or a community centre, or another room you can use, that you can share that and partner with somebody to have a place of welcome, do consider that. And also think about partnerships with other organisations that may want to come along to your place of welcome from time to time. They then provide activities in their place in your community may like. Again, I do agree you should be checking with your community first if that's something they would like to do. It's no good having somebody from the West Bromwich Foundation come in and do seated exercise if nobody wants to do seated exercise, because that wouldn't be very helpful. Yeah, if they would like that, you know, somebody to come along and do either a game with them or some artwork, that's something you could perhaps partner with a local organisation that could provide that. Services like the fire crew, they love popping along to a place of welcome as well, and they can usually give out really good information about your home safety and your escape routes, and give out free carbon monoxide monitors, things like that. So there's different people you can partner with, and as well in terms of perhaps even supplies for your place of welcome. Lots of local shops or superstores have community champions who might want to give you some donations to get your place of welcome up and running. So do think about partnering with people and looking at organisations who might want to join with you in setting up, you know, a lovely place of welcome atmosphere. And I think those are probably the extra tips I'd say. Look after yourselves, look out for other people to share the burden with. Yeah, and just be as generous as you can, I suppose. I mean, if you can only afford to give out a jar of instant coffee and you just your bog standard tea bags, that's all you do. But if you can afford to be generous, then please do. Be as generous as you can. People will appreciate it and they'll feel like it's a treat coming along to a place of welcome, and really enjoy that. Have a mix of volunteers, I'd suggest. It's good to have somebody to greet perhaps and show people where the toilets are if they don't know, and just settle them in with somebody, you know, who might chat to them. Also, it's good to have people who are like, notice the outsiders. You don't always have to be extrovert. Introverts are great as well. They can spot people who perhaps just not joining as much and have those quiet conversations as well. So, and appreciating the skills and talents of your team, and not everybody has to provide the same level of welcome or you know, shared conversations. It can be different subtle things that make a place of welcome work. I hope that helps. If you've got any questions, I'd be more than happy to share experiences of some of the places of welcome I know.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Carrie. Those are really helpful. All nuggets there. Right, we have now got some time for questions, as promised. And I can see just one that's come up in the chat so far. Thank you, Naomi, for that. The question is, how do we ask our neighbours? We are a gathered church, not in an estate or community. Great question. Carrie, sorry to come straight back to you. I wonder if you've got any advice about that.
Yeah, again, I think it's about, I think you do start off with your own church community, if they're going to be coming along and being volunteers, and place of welcome do take time to grow. So I would say if that's something you're thinking, start off, you feel like it's only a church community meeting and you're all volunteers, that's fine. As long as you enjoy meeting together and you want to sit down and have a to grow your place of welcome and you're having a nice time. If you're having fun, then naturally people will come along and want to stay with you and have a cup of tea and a chat as well. So if it starts with just volunteers, don't worry about it. As long as you're enjoying yourself and you've got the time to do that, that's great. Then start asking people, you know, and mention it at your bus stops, in your local shops. You know, would you like to come along to this coffee morning, or come and have a cup of tea and a chat? And then once you're having those conversations, that's when you start to say to people, what would you like this space to be like? You know, would you like to play a game of bingo next week? Or would you like to bring your knitting along? Or should we talk about a book that we've read? Do we want to get a visitor along to share something? You start asking those questions. And I would say it doesn't hurt to try. And if it doesn't work and people didn't particularly enjoy it, then you don't do it. But one place of welcome who put out colouring books for people to do, so, you know, just chat and do some colouring, and sometimes having an activity really does help. If somebody's shy and doesn't particularly want to engage straight away in a conversation, they can perhaps doodle or do something with their hands. And for some months, you know, these colouring books and these colouring sheets went down a storm, and then all of a sudden people just weren't interested anymore. And I suppose it's just in life, you have fads on things, don't you? So don't be afraid if something doesn't work anymore and you want to change it, and that's when you go back and say, oh, you know, okay, that's not working, what should we do next week? Anybody got any ideas? So yeah, take time to grow your place of welcome. Don't worry if it's only 6 of you to start off with, and you know, you slowly add people, as long as you're having fun. But then when people start coming along and you're asking people in those community settings, ask them what they want to do. That's how I'd go about it. And I will share one place of welcome that failed, sadly. So just to say, they don't always work. So again, don't be disheartened. But it was at the back of a pharmacy. It was a row of houses where the pharmacy are taking place, the shop in this row of houses, and they've got a garden, so they wanted to have it as a community allotment. Fantastic idea. I thought it was great. They could share the produce at the end. There was nothing to me suggest that this wouldn't work. They'd even got a room inside the pharmacy if it rained. They flyed 1,000 properties and still didn't get many people come along to that place of welcome. You know, I won't know the reasoning for that. There was on a thoroughfare, you know, you'd think people going in and out the pharmacy, they could have asked them if they wanted to come for a tea when they were collecting their, you know, repeat prescription. It was school moms would be coming past as well with children in buggies, but it just didn't work, that one. You know, I'd like to think at another time, you know, they would try that again. And it might be just a time and season. But yeah, I think you've got to keep plugging away. You've got to keep asking people. I say return that invite, and have a really welcoming atmosphere when they do come. It's a thing, isn't it, really? Sometimes, you know, again, it depends on, say, the needs community. If they don't actually, you know, can afford a Costa and they're happy going to a Costa, I suppose that could be part of it. Are you promoting it as many places you can think? I mean, that's the only other thing, is to have little flyers in, I don't know, but where people do congregate, you know, mention that in doctors' surgeries, can leaflets go in the book bags of school children if you've got a local school, so that, you know, when they go home, the parents or the grandparents who pick them up see those little flyers. It might cost a little bit for the flyers, I understand that, or in hairdressers. We do have a list, I think, on the Place of Welcome website, of all the suggested places you could promote a place of welcome, which I'm sure Amy could get out to people. But that's something to just go and just check. Have we done that? Have we promoted it that way? Have we told people about it that way? And the other thing is, if you've got social prescribers in your area, whether you've made contact with them, because obviously social prescribers are looking for places for people to go. So instead of having a medical prescription to make them feel better, they want this social prescription to get out and about and meet people. Could a social prescriber bring people to your place of welcome, to have a free cup of tea and a coffee? Could they introduce them to you that way? And could you make links? Yeah, again, get your sort of, you know, your local PCSO, are they aware of you? So that when they're out and about doing their job, that they can tell people about you as well, and they might want to pop in and have a cup of tea as well. So it's, you know, your local councillors, do they know? Invite your local councillor along. I know it's you know, but it is plugging away. But if you've tried all those things, then I would say, well done. There's not much more you can do. You know, you're trying different activities. You tell him as many people as you can, and like I say, sometimes, you know, you've got to say this just isn't working. But if you're still enjoying meeting as a church community, then I would say completely carry on doing it, you know, because it's, you know, it is working for you as well. And you've got to realise that Place of Welcome is about your needs as well as everybody else's needs. You are your community too. So I had a Place of Welcome in Brown Hills where I live, and they were saying they only have got 6 people to come to their Place of Welcome. And oftentimes they'd end up doing the gardening outside the church because nobody would turn up. And I said, well, actually, don't worry about that too much. People will see you visible outside doing something, and a person might come along who wants your church tidy and doing something for your mental health and well-being. You know, you're contributing that way. But again, they just tried a couple of different activities, and slowly they did grow their Place of Welcome. You know, and it was the traditional, would you believe, knitting that got people in. And I always think, oh, you know, is that something that's you know, a bit dated now? Should we look at things? But actually, no, the people love knitting. They were going to do it once a month, then it ended up being weekly. They'd have a knitting corner, and that slowly grew. And then from biscuits in the warm welcome era, over winter they did soup and a roll and extended their hours and things like that. But it is trial and error sometimes. We just, you know, keep the faith. Like I say, if that list we can get to about, have you tried everywhere you can let people know? That might be one way to go about it. Just get that bit of working again with people to let them know you're there.
Thank you. Sorry, just have to move us on now because we are rapidly running out of time. But I just wanted to let you know before we go, remind you about the rest of these webinars that we have coming up within this series. So we've got Getting Your Church Online and Improving Your Church's Online Presence is coming up in a week or so. And then we've got Resilience for Leaders and Volunteers of Church-Based Social Action Projects. We've got Adapting to Our Community's Church Beyond Walls, and we've got Recruiting and Retaining Good Volunteers. You can find out more about all of these on our website. If you go to Church Urban Fund, I'll also send you a link in the email that I send around afterwards, along with a recording of this session. So you'll have the information for all the other webinars as well. Sign up to one, sign up to all of them, whatever you think will be relevant and helpful to your church. So if you've got any other questions, please do feel free to email us. And there's an email address there on the screen now. And as I said, I will send you all an email as well with the recording and some useful information about Places of Welcome and Growing Good and the future webinars that we're running linking to the Growing Good theme. But thank you so much for giving up some of your time this morning and coming along. I do hope it has been helpful to you in some way. Yeah, thank you. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone. Bye, everyone.